Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to welcome everyone to our Oversight Committee meeting today. This is the 6th meeting that we have for our Oversight Committee Community Risk Assessment. As I had mentioned beforehand, we will be having a public comment period at the end of this meeting. It will be a 2-minute public comment period, and we would like to get to as many people as possible. We do have a hard stop at 4 p.m. today. We will be stopping everyone at exactly 2 minutes. I know in the past we've been a little lenient on that, but in the interest of being able to allow as many participants to speak as possible, we will be holding to that exact time today. To start us off with, before we go into the risk assessment presentation, we have, as part of our open issues, the MRC claims process follow-up, and we do have Brandon Matson here from MRC to speak on that. So I'm going to promote him to panelist and give him an opportunity to talk about that.
Okay, Nicole, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, Brandon, we can. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Nicole, and good afternoon, Oversight Committee members and members of the public who are viewing today's meeting. I am Brandon Matson with Martinez Refining Company Community Relations, and I thank you for inviting us to update you on the claims process that we implemented in response to our spent catalyst release. So to start, our claims advisor continues to diligently review claims, which necessarily does require appropriate privacy and confidentiality as mutually agreed to with the claimants that respects both the claimants and that process. Accordingly, I do need to maintain the integrity of the claims process and those associated privacy and confidentiality interests. But with that in mind, and in the spirit of cooperation with County Health and this committee, I do want to offer some insights into the claims process. First and foremost, we are deeply committed to appropriately addressing the claims of community members who were impacted by the spent catalyst release. And second, I want to be sure to address comments and questions made during prior committee meetings alleging that we are using the Bay Area Air Quality Management District plume modeling map to deny claims. I can assure County Health, committee members, and the public that our claims advisor considers various factors in the decision-making process without relying on any single component, such as the Air District's map, to determine whether someone has a legitimate claim. Further, claims have been approved for community members who reside outside the Air District's plume modeling map. So just to address that issue again, claims have been approved for community members who reside outside the Air District's plume modeling map. Now, for anyone who may be dissatisfied with our claims process or has further questions or concerns, our claims representative is available and willing to visit with any claimant regarding the process or response to their claim. Anyone in the community can reach out to our claims representative through our hotline at 800-542-7113. I'll say that number again, that's 800-542-7113. You can also find that number on the MRC Oversight Committee landing page hosted on the County Hazmat's website. So in closing, to further maintain the integrity of the claims process and associated privacy and confidentiality interests, this is all I'm able to share with you today, but I thank you again for your interest in the integrity of our claims process and for this chance to talk to you today. So with that, Nicole, those conclude my remarks, and I'll turn it back to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today, Brandon. I appreciate you addressing the comments and concerns from our Oversight Committee and the community. We're going to move right over now to the next item on our agenda, which is to talk about the risk assessment presentation. And so to get us started, I would like to hand it over to Dr. Ori Zavelli for opening remarks.
Hello, all. I'm Ori Zavelli. I've been on some of these meetings before. I'm the County Health Officer and Public Health Director. Thank you for the invitation today. I'm here to give the overview of the presentation that we're about to hear from our toxicology consultants. The toxicologist hired by Contra Costa Health has determined that a release of spent catalyst in November 2022 does not present a greater risk to public health from hazardous metals in the soil. Contra Costa Health has lifted its March 7th health advisory regarding produce grown in soil near the site of the release, and this confirms that the primary health risk from the spent catalyst release occurred in the initial hours and days after the refinery release. We'll get right to the presentation of the data, and then we'll start it off with Deputy Health Director Matt Kaufman.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Kaufman, one of the deputy directors here for the Contra Costa County Health Department. First, I want to start off by thanking our community for attending this meeting, as well as the Oversight Committee for participating in this process. As Dr. Zavelli indicated, we do have a report out today on the soil sampling that was conducted, as well as the community risk assessment that was run by TRC, which was the contractor selected by the Oversight Committee to look at any increased health risk as a result of the Martinez Refining Company's spent catalyst release that occurred on November 24th and 25th. Nicole, if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so for a bit of our project background, I think most folks are familiar with this, but we are investigating a spent catalyst dust release that occurred on November 24th and 25th from one of the units at the refinery called the Fluid Catalytic Cracker Unit. And that occurred from the Martinez Refining Company facility that's located in Martinez. We did observe physical evidence of the release that was reported both by community members as well as observed by our own county health staff and Bay Area Air Quality Management staff that responded to the incident days after the incident had occurred. The county conducted analytical testing of the dust that we did observe that day, as well as the air district, and found it to be consistent with the spent catalyst that was reported to be released after the fact by the refinery. And in addition to the spent catalyst being present, we also found metals that were associated with the spent catalyst that was released from the refinery. As a result of that, Dr. Zavelli, the health officer for Contra Costa County, did request that the Air District perform a plume model, really looking at where the possible deposition was of the spent catalyst that was released on November 24th and into the morning of November 25th. Next slide. So just a reminder for folks, we really have done two things here. We've done soil sampling, and then we've conducted a risk assessment. And the soil sampling was conducted at 14 locations that were based primarily on the plume model that the Air District performed, as well as community input, and also the observations that were made by county health staff and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District staff. Of those 14 locations, 2 of them were actually in Solano County in the Benicia area, because the plume model did indicate that there was potential for impact to the Benicia area. We did laboratory analysis of the soil samples for 15 metals that we found to be consistent with spent catalyst, really the sample that we took shortly after the incident had occurred on November 26th. So the risk assessment objectives and the scope that TRC embarked on was they were going to provide us as the community an understanding of the potential risks that are posed by the chronic exposure, or sometimes termed long-term exposure, to this spent catalyst that has now been deposited on many surfaces, including predominantly soil. And we're anticipating a final report that will identify whether the catalyst dust presents a long-term health risk, not only to the health of us as individual community members, but also the environment in which we live, play, work. So I'm going to now turn it over to TRC, Jenny Phillips, who was again hired by Contra Costa County Health at the direction of this oversight committee to tell us a bit about their process and their findings. Jenny?
Hey, hi, thanks everybody. Just as way of introduction, I am with TRC, as they said, and I'm based in Colorado. This is my 35th year working in the area of human health and ecological risk assessment. I am a board certified toxicologist, and I'm really quite honored to get to talk to you about this today. We've spent a good bit of time thinking about this issue, and happy to have the opportunity just to talk to you about it and share what we found, and certainly try and answer all the questions that you have. So thank you very much. This first slide is just a slide that shows the sample locations. So we ended up, as Matt told you, taking 14 soil samples, and they were distributed around a pretty large area, but were focused on where the model predicted and where we also got input from the community to understand where would be the best places to try and get an idea of the presence or absence of this spent catalyst dust in the soil. And with that, go to the next slide. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our data evaluation process, and then I'm going to share with you the soil data in a series of graphs. So what we have done is taken the soil data results and compared them to the expected range of regional background soil levels. We also compared them to the protective health standards for residential soil. So let me slow down there just a minute and tell you a couple of definitions. So the first definition I'm going to talk to you about is background. So in our business, we look at both the potential site-related impacts and background impacts. And background is really refers to the natural occurring concentration of metals, or maybe it's a non-site related level of chemicals. It could come from car exhaust, right? It could come from household use of chemicals, pesticides, what is naturally occurring or is present there within the community before the release of the catalyst dust. That is referred to as background. And the California Department of Toxic Substance and Control, which is called DTSC, it has a definition that I thought might be kind of helpful for you guys to hear. Metals occur naturally in soil and water at all hazardous waste sites, but risk assessment should eliminate from consideration those whose range of concentration fall within the range of local ambient or background conditions. This is done by comparing the concentration of inorganic constituents, so the metals, at the site to a body of data representative of local conditions that's unaffected by site-related activities. So in this case, what we did was we compared the site data to a range of regional background levels, and if the concentration detected was within that range, then there's no cause for adverse risk concern. So therefore, it's a pretty big deal, something really important that we need to understand, right? And that background can range from localized, or it could be ubiquitous to California. So California is known to have certain metals in proportion to the regional local geology, like arsenic, for example. And I'm in the upcoming graphs, I'm going to focus a little bit on arsenic, because the health-based screening level for arsenic for residential land use is lower than the measured concentrations. And that is often the case with arsenic because the background range is higher. Across the United States, it could typically be within 1 to 40 milligram per kilogram or part per million. But the health-based screening level, which I'll explain to you next, for arsenic is 0.11 milligram per kilogram. So we're going to talk about that more when I get to that slide, but just as a precursor to kind of get your head started thinking about what we're doing and what those terms mean. So we talked about background. We talked about geology a little bit, that metals are primarily present simply due to geology and to the soil. And then the last term that we're going to talk about is health standards. So California has specific screening levels for protection of residential land use. They are modified a bit from federal Environmental Protection Agency standards to be a bit more conservative, to be more health protective. Those are the ones that we use. And next, I'm going to show you a series of graphs. And in those graphs, they're only soil samples. That's the only thing that we took samples of, and that's all we're reporting. The units are in part per million, or ppm, which is the same as milligrams per kilogram. And that's shown in the graphs, and I'll show you where. And then we used a variety of colors. We use green shading, which is representative of that expected background range that I just explained to you. A yellow line, which is representative of residential soil health standard. So what does that include? Well, those are published values by the California DTSC, Department of Toxic Substances Control, and they are protective of really any residential property in California. Okay, they're not site specific to here. They're a comparison level for residential land use, and they assume that the person spends most, if not all, of the day at home, and that the activities that a resident might have include typical home chores like cooking, cleaning, laundering, but also outdoor activities. So the resident is assumed to be exposed via soil, through incidental ingestion of soil, dermal contact with soil, or inhalation of volatiles and fugitive dust. Those are the values that we used in this assessment to compare to the soil concentrations. Within the available set of screening levels, the residential soil, say that 3 times, the residential soil health standard was used because it's the strictest one. And, you know, it expects ongoing regular exposure for a long period of time. But we want you to make sure that the public understands that we didn't cherry pick a screening level with higher acceptable concentrations for convenience of use. No, this is the one that's most appropriate based on the risk analysis that we wanted to perform for this assessment, because it was driven by the concerns of the residents who want to know if their homes are safe. So those are the components that we used for the evaluation of the data. And then I'm going to slowly walk you through the next couple of slides, and then we'll pick it up a little as you become comfortable with seeing the information that's on them. So next slide, please. Okay, so on this slide, you're going to see some of those colors that I just talked to you about. So the blue dots on this slide represent the concentration of aluminum in soil at the location label that is shown in the x-axis across the bottom. Okay, so I don't know if my cursor will work on yours. I don't think it will. The concentrations are reported in units of milligram per kilogram, or as I mentioned before, you might hear them talked about as ppm. And then the y-axis shows the scale for the soil concentration and the comparison values. So the scales are going to change on every slide because they include the range of background and the screening levels, and we have to get it all within that same slide. So kind of watch the scales on the left-hand side. The yellow line is that California DTSC screening level for residential land use. So it's the soil health standard, it's in yellow, and then the light green, it's a whole area that's shaded. And that's because we are looking at a range of background. So we're looking within the region in California, what is the range of background concentrations? For aluminum, it's falls between, I think, 18,000 and 71,000. I might have a typo there. And because of that whole range, the whole range essentially that you can see. And so aluminum, this is a good one to start with, although they're in alphabetical order, is the main metal component in the catalyst. And it's considered, you know, a relatively safe material, metal in the environment. And you can see that because the yellow line is way up there, nearly 80,000 milligrams per kilogram. So now if we go to the next one, the next slide down, I'll show you another example of a metal that is quite different from aluminum. Okay, and this metal is arsenic. In this case, we have that the yellow line, the residential soil health standard, is running right along the bottom of this graph because it was the residential soil standard is 0.11 milligrams per kilogram. The sample dots are the blue again; those are the sample locations, and you can see that every one of them exceeds the health default standard for residential use. In addition, we have that green range, okay, and that range is actually from 1.8 to 31 milligrams per kilogram. And so all of the samples that we took, all 14 of them fell within that range of background, okay? And And this is a challenge, right? Because the background can sometimes, what's naturally occurring can sometimes be kind of problematic for a risk assessment, because the elements detected at the site might be more comprised of naturally occurring metals. And in this case, the arsenic health standard is 100 times lower than the typical background. And so in this case, what we're really concerned about to understand, is there a health effect or not, is what is the normal background range? All of the samples fall within that, okay? Another point, generally, EPA doesn't clean up below natural background. You know, there are a few elements that are like this. Arsenic is one that's well known, that oftentimes exceeds these risk-based screening criteria. And then what we would do is compare it to that background range. So with all of that said, I still have a little more to share with you about arsenic, and to kind of inform you a little about what is arsenic. You know, tell me a little bit more about it, rather than jumping off of it, since we have a number of them here that exceed. So again, I said it's a naturally occurring element, and there are two forms of it. There's an inorganic arsenic, which is usually found in the environment, and it's combined with other elements such as oxygen, iron, sulfide, sulfur, etc. There's also an organic arsenic, which is formed by arsenic combined with carbon and hydrogen. So arsenic exists in two forms. The common sources for arsenic, honestly, the general population might be exposed to arsenic in air, drinking water, and food, but food is the largest source of arsenic. And it's typically in fish and shellfish, as you are probably familiar with from fish advisories. And that typical range is like 20 to 140 part per billion as an example. So inorganic arsenic compounds are mainly used to preserve wood. Copper chromated arsenic, it's called CCA, is used to make pressure treated lumber. And it's no longer used in the United States for residential purposes, but it's still used for industrial applications, as widely used. So certainly could have this in your backyard, as I do in mine. And then the organic arsenic compounds are used as pesticides, primarily on cotton fields and in orchards. And so you can see where these arsenic compounds might be present in background concentrations in our environment. One of the last thing I'll share with you about arsenic is one of the questions that I understood you all had to do with eating homegrown produce. And here we just showed you that the arsenic concentrations are within background range, but ever so slightly above the concentrations for residential screening levels. So we looked at the available data for arsenic plant uptake into plants. And the Federal Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, it's called ATSDR, actually published a pamphlet on this in 2015 called Safe Gardening, Safe Play, and a Safe Home. And this pamphlet was focused on a site in Spring Valley, Washington, DC, and it had concentrations very similar to the concentrations that we found within the 20 milligram per kilogram range. And the maximum detected that we found at this within our 14 samples was 28. So approximately the same. There's a lot of details that I could share with you, and we could do that even on the next committee meeting. But the important salient point is that the ATSDR study concluded that even for those areas that showing elevated levels of arsenic, the uptake into homegrown vegetables or fruits is not likely to be sufficient to cause any health effects to persons gardening in the soil or eating vegetables grown from the garden. So that's a very important message that we want to share with you today. And again, there's a good bit of science behind it that we'd be happy to share in upcoming meetings. So with that, we'll go on maybe to the next one. So in this figure, we're looking at the metal barium, and with the scale on the on the y-axis is pretty large, right? It goes from 0 to 16,000. And that's because the health-based standard is right up there near the between 14 and 16,000 range. However, the background concentrations are between 130 and 1,500 milligrams per kilogram. So in this case, the background is more at the bottom of the scale, and it's showing you that barium's not very toxic, because you could have a lot of barium, it could be above background, and it still wouldn't necessarily be an issue. So what you can see here is that all of the sample concentrations, the blue dots, are within the background range, and they're also below the screening level. I hope that's a straightforward way for you to look at these figures. I could take a pause and see if anyone has a question on figure interpretation that you need me to explain it better.
Hey, Jenny, let's go through all the slides and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Perfect. Okay, we'll do that. Okay, next slide. This one is beryllium, and in beryllium, what you see is the background concentrations in green are about 0.37 to 3 milligrams per kilogram. So it shows the same picture as what we saw for barium. It's A-OK. That samples that we took are within that background range and below the health standard. Next is chromium. And for chromium, we analyzed total chromium, and there's a screening level for trivalent chromium, which is a type of chromium that is closest to the total chromium, which the lab analyzed for. And it's the yellow line is at the very top of this graph, and the background concentration is in green. You can't even hardly see it because of the scale, and it's at 24.8 to 1,690 milligrams per kilogram. And so it's at the very bottom of that, and all of the chromium were within that background range again. One last note on chromium. We also analyzed for hexavalent chromium, and that is a more toxic form of chromium. And the results of that analysis showed that all the samples were non-detect. So all of the detection limits were below the screening limits. So that's some good news again. We'll go on to the next one. Cobalt has pretty much the same story as a number of the other chemicals, metals that we've just been talking about. The site blue dots are all within the green range of background and below the yellow line. Next is copper, which looks about the same as the chromium did. The expected background range is 11.8 to 99.7. So it's at the very bottom of that graph. All of the detected concentrations are within that range, and it's well below the screening level. Next is lead. For lead, there was one sample, that very first sample there, the MRC-1, that was just above the screening level of 80. It was at 82. So all the other samples were below it and within the range of background. And lead is another chemical that many times has high background ranges, as you can see here. So the range here is 3.3 to 247 milligrams per kilogram in this region of California. And I kind of know a lot about lead because I grew up in a mining town in Colorado called Leadville. And we actually had background lead there in the percentage range. So there can be huge variability in lead background concentrations. If you're interested in hearing a bit more about lead, you know, the basics of that element and the possible sources when we open it up here at the end, just ask me, and I do have a little bit more I'd be happy to share with you guys. Next is molybdenum. And molybdenum, the background concentrations are at the very, very bottom of this graph. They range from 0.67 to 3.3. So a very small range of background, but the health-based level is at the top of this graph. It's the yellow. So all of the concentrations are below the screening levels or the standard levels and within background. We're getting there, a few more. With nickel, the background level is 2.93 to 2,000 240 milligrams per kilogram. So a wide range, again, nickel concentrations that are found in background. All of the soil samples from our assessment fall at the bottom of that range. And the residential soil health standard is right there, a little bit below 1,000. Our report, of course, will have the exact numbers, but not particularly important for this, where we're just trying to show you if they're above, below, are we okay, or is there something to be concerned about? Next one is selenium. So in this case, selenium was non-detect in all of the samples. And so, and the concentrations, those detection limits were below the screening level and within the background range. So that one was pretty easy. Next is vanadium. And for vanadium, the background range is 46 to 230 milligrams per kilogram. And all of the samples fell within that range and are below the health standard for vanadium of 390 milligram per kilogram. And then the last one is zinc. And zinc had, again, a low expected background range, kind of at the bottom of that graph. It's 9.3 to 474 milligrams per kilogram. And but the health standard is pretty high. See, it's at the top of that graph in between 20 and 25,000. So it's again saying that in the zinc, while maybe present, is really not very toxic. It's pretty safe metal. So with that, I will go on to the next slide and share with you our conclusions. So as you saw through all of those figures, and I appreciate your patience, but we wanted to show you all of them to be complete. None of the metals analyzed exceeded the regional background range. 2 metals exceeded the screening levels that are protective of human health. That was arsenic, the second slide that I showed you, and then lead that was about halfway through and just had that one sample that was at 82 milligram per kilogram, and the screening level is at 80. And those exceedances are likely not to be associated with the spent catalyst, but more associated with within the background range. We did look at the proportion of metals to like match the spent catalyst composition, and they didn't match. And so we didn't find any of the soil samples that we took that had the same kind of proportion or composition as the spent catalyst, though they all had some percentage of many of the same metals because they're those naturally occurring metals. So that would make sense, right? And so really the influence of the catalyst dust on the soil analysis, there was an estimate of 20 to 24 tons of catalyst dust released, and most of that was silica and aluminum. And the component that included the other metals that we spent a lot of time just now going through was very small, and it was spread over a large area. And that's one of the reasons that we're not seeing a big impact on the soil content in the data that we just took. So with that, we really are concluding that the soil within this area is safe. It's safe. And TRC is not recommending additional sampling or evaluation at this time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to you, Ori.
Thank you, Jenny, and thank you to our TRC toxicology consultants. And before we open it up for Q&A, I just want to mention, we are lifting the health advisory today related to gardening in the soil and eating the food grown in the soil. But we have heard of residents who have had their own soil tested, or because of background variation, they may find slightly higher levels of arsenic or lead. And I just want to remind people that there are things you can do to protect yourselves. If that's the case, you can still garden, but you can consider gardening in raised bed, bringing in mulch and topsoil. Remember to rinse and scrub the produce that you grow in your yard, if that's the case. And if you're growing root vegetables, you can also consider peeling them, peel your carrots. Avoid tracking dirt inside, and make sure you wash well after working in the yard. And then avoid eating dirt or letting your children eat dirt. So those are all sort of good safety practices regardless. And with that, I think we'll go right to the Q&A.
Actually,
Before we do
Ori,
that, Matt, I believe you
Oh,
wanted
sorry.
to also add some
That's
comments.
okay.
Thank you.
thank you, Dr. Savelli. Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to thank the members of the Oversight Committee for a lot of tireless work that you've done in supporting this community risk assessment. As you know, this is sort of the first step in many phases of our investigative process, and I just want to highlight a few things. First, once this final report comes out, a draft final report actually from TRC, there will be a 45-day comment period that's open to the public for you all as community members to submit comments on the community risk assessment. And we'll be talking a bit about that process and what that will look like in the future. As everyone knows, I think this case has been referred to the district attorney, and I know that the district attorney continues to investigate it. And then lastly, we are going to be conducting an independent root cause analysis of this incident. That is going to be conducted by Scott Berger and Associates, which was a firm that was selected by this oversight committee. I just want to be crystal clear, though, with our community. These results do not excuse the Martinez Refining Company for the lack of notification at the onset of this incident. While this does bring some relief in terms of long-term health impacts to our community as a result, the lack of timely notification negated our ability as health officials to protect our community, including those most vulnerable, namely the medically compromised, the elderly, and the children within our community. Timely notification is not only required by law, it's the responsible thing to do for an industrial facility that's operating within our community. The health department will continue to work with the district attorney to hold MRC accountable for this release. We will do everything within our ability to protect the health of our community and ensure something like this does not happen again. Lastly, I want to thank the members of our community for your patience and trusting us to lead this very important work for you. With that, Nicole, I will turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, Matt. So just a quick rundown of what we're going to be doing next. We will be having question and answer session time from the Oversight Committee. Then our communications officer, Kim McCarl, is going to address the group. And then we will go to public comment. So just a reminder for all of you in the public, we will give you 2 minutes at the very end. So if you just bear with us through 2 more agenda items, then we'll be able to get to your comments. So members of the Oversight Committee, please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. I see Tony first and then Thomas Lang. So Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, can you hear me okay, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay, I have a comment more than a question. 194 days after the release, we are now at the point where we're telling people it's okay to eat the fresh fruits and vegetables. The process is flawed. This should have been done much quicker a while ago. I know that you and Matt are looking at the process, but I'm upset with the way the process works.
Understood, Tony. Matt, do you want to comment?
No, I think Tony, point well taken. And, through every incident, I think we perform the best we can, and we use it as a learning opportunity to improve for the future. And Nicole and I and other members of the health department have had many discussions about how we can work more quickly in the future to get answers to the residents when something like this occurs. I think one of the things that we balance and we take very seriously is involving the community in this process. You all as oversight community members, having an open, transparent process for our community to observe all of the work being done, to comment on the work being done as we're going through the process. Those things do take time, but I think we could have done it quicker, Tony, and we'll commit to that in the future. But thank you for the comment.
Thank you, Tony. Next, we'll move to Tom and then Lauren.
Okay, I'll lower my hand. Thank you so much, Jenny, for the presentation. Really nice presentation. I have 2 observations to make that I think could be relevant to your final report. And one of them is that I think it's important to break out what the natural range is really calculated from. Because, you know, you mentioned it's the range of sort of natural concentrations, both regionally and statewide. That wasn't totally clear to me. So I think, you know, that methodology should be broken out so that the report is, you know, appreciated for what it is. The second thing I noticed in a lot of the graphs, you know, I think we have to work a little bit on the scales. So for example, you know, either the health limit, the yellow line was really, really high, and then the natural range and the values in the soil samples were pegged at 0. And so it might be useful in those cases where either the natural range goes at the top and the other variables are pegged at 0, to have like a little inset that shows those variables that are ranged towards 0. So you kind of see what their variation is as long as they're detectable. And if they're not detectable, just make it clear, you know, not detectable. And then the third point I just have to make is, you know, this is very good information regarding the current concentration of these materials in the soil as they are now, but those measurements were taken out after a lot of exposure to heavy winter weather. So I think one question that will come up is, to what extent, you know, was the spent catalyst fallout washed into water, like, you know, for example, reservoirs or potentially sources of drinking water or wells or things like that. And so that's all I have.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks for your input. Certainly great input on the background and discussion in the report. And that definitely is one of the components of a EPA-based risk assessment, is to discuss background and exactly where you come up with it. So you'll see more about that. And then on the graphs, that was a little tricky with the scales, but we wanted to make sure we were like transparent with all the data. So I like your idea of inset graphs as well. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you. Okay, I see Lauren has taken her hand down, so we'll move to Kent.
Hello, yeah, I've got I've got 3 questions specifically. The first of which is, I heard about trivalent chromium, but I didn't hear any mention about hexavalent chromium, unless I missed it. I was interrupted a couple times during that section. So was there actually an evaluation of hexavalent chrome in the samples?
Yes, there was, sir. We did all of the soil samples were analyzed for hexavalent chromium. The detection limit on those samples ranged from less than 2.2 to less than 2.5 milligrams per kilogram. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I looked at the wrong line. They range from less than 0.22 to less than 0.27 milligrams per kilogram. And the residential health standard is 0.3 for hexavalent chromium. Detect, but they were all non-detect at a concentration below the screening criteria. And we did have our data validator, quality assurance quality control officer review all of the data.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next question, which is general for Contra Costa Health, the health advisory is being lifted now, so I can let people that have asked me that the health advisory has been lifted at this moment.
Correct.
Okay. And then the final one is, what do we know about what the FBI and the EPA are doing? Because they've been trotting around town asking people questions.
Hi, Kent. This is Matt Kaufman with the Health Department. I think I could probably answer that the best that any of us can. And that is, we really don't know a lot about the Federal Environmental Protection Agency, otherwise known as the EPA, or the FBI's investigation. They have not sort of filled us in on details of that investigation. We're really not privy to what they're looking at, who they're talking to. So I think those questions are really best asked to the federal EPA and FBI.
Thank you. That's it for me.
You're welcome.
Great, thank you. I will do one last call for questions from the Oversight Committee. Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised, so I'm going to turn it over to Kim McCarl, our Communications Officer.
Great, thank you. And I want to start by reiterating what Matt said about all the effort and time this committee has put into this process. It certainly has been a big one, and there are steps still to come. So we appreciate you all and the work that you are and are willing to do. I wanted to just quickly review sort of what we're doing to get this information out, and then talk a little bit about what I would recommend next steps to be, and make sure that you are all on board with that. So we're doing this presentation. We sent a press release just about 10 or so minutes ago that outlined everything that you heard today. There will also be an e-blast going out at the end of this meeting to the people who signed up for that email list that you all recommended that we put together. So I think at last count, we had about 60 people who are registered for that. So the press release will go out there. We're doing some social media posts, and all of these documents that you've seen today will be posted to our website, along with the recording of this presentation. So you can all go back and watch it as you like. We will be, just to make sure that our media partners who really do a great service in communicating with a broad community have all their questions answered. We'll be doing a brief media availability around 4:30. I see many of them here on this call, but we want to make sure that they have what they need as well. So we'll do that around 4:30. So then some other folks talked a little bit about sort of next steps, and that is the finalization of the full report. So what you will get today is the press release, and then I didn't mention an executive summary that sort of outlines from TRC what these general findings are. That's all posted to our website, or will be posted to our website. But there will be a full report coming, and it's going to take a number of weeks, I think, until that full report is available. And when that is ready, the 45-day comment period that Nicole talked about will open. And so we were thinking about, you all have been vocal about a mailer, and we think that that's important. So we think as we get kind of in the week or so before the public comment opens, that we would send a mailer throughout the community that sort of explains what the results of the study are, and then tells people exactly how to comment. So we feel like that's pretty solid information that we can take a little time to get ready, and also a good call to action, which is ultimately what we want people to know from this information. So we've kind of worked hard to make sure this word gets out, but I'd be happy to hear from you all if you have any other suggestions or any other ways that you want it to get out. I also will reiterate that everything that we're doing in English and Spanish. So you will see even the email blast that goes out this afternoon has the Spanish translation, and we have our interpreters with us today, which reminds me I should talk more slowly for the poor people who are interpreting. So with that, I'm happy to take any comments or feedback you all have. Otherwise, that's kind of the plan that we will move forward with.
Great. Thank you, Kim. I see Lauren has her hand raised. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yep, coming in right behind Kim. I just want to remind, at least for the Martinez audience here today, is that when Kim does distribute the information out, I will be taking it and putting it on our channels as we normally do. So I know our e-news hits thousands of people in our community. So we think that'll get the message out pretty quickly. I want to note that our school, Martinez Unified School District Superintendent Helen Rossi's on the call today too. And I've already kind of pre-scheduled with her, the coordination on getting information out to the school district. That's just been something through this experience that we've heard loud and clear from residents and parents, that they want us to be working closely with our school partners to get the message out. So those are just some items on my list that I will commit to on the Martinez side.
Thank
you,
you.
Lauren.
We really do very much appreciate the partnership of the city. We also have an equal partnership with the Air District. We've done some outreach to the Solano side, and I see some of their folks are on the call today. So we certainly will work in partnership with them on making sure that that community is fully informed as well. So always appreciate the partnership and the help amplifying the message.
Do we have any additional questions or comments for Kim? Okay, thank you very much, Kim. We will now go into our public comment period. We have just about an hour left in this meeting, so I will ask those of you who are attendees to raise your hand. I will start going through the list. As a reminder, everyone will have exactly 2 minutes to speak today so that we can get to as many people as possible. So I see first Heidi Taylor, and then we will have Kathy go next. So Kayla, please promote Heidi so we can start her 2-minute public comment period.
Sure. Okay, Heidi, go ahead. Your 2 minutes is starting now.
I just want to say thank you again to Matt for your comments because they're so very important. I am very elated to be able to plant tomatoes and basil and everything this summer, but this is just the beginning. And Matt made that point. There's still, the DA is looking into this. The feds are looking into it. Contra Costa Health is doing an independent investigation. And so thank you, Matt, for those comments. We are grateful for Contra Costa Health and everything that you've done. And we continue, at least those of us who belong to Healthy Martinez Refinery Accountability Group, continue our relationship with you and work towards this never happening again and holding MRC accountable. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Heidi. Next, we'll go to Kathy.
Okay, Kathy, you should be able to come off mute. Your time is starting now.
Okay. I guess I'm off mute?
Yes.
Yes, okay, great. I just have 3 things to say. Where will this particular report be available online to read? Not just to view, but actually to read the whole text. And will the full report, when it comes out, also be online? And if you can, how many pages do you expect that full report to be? And I hope that the information on the health standards that were used, that is the yellow line, that there will be some background to those standards, where that comes from, and what we can expect for people who are healthy and those who are not. Finally, I would like to know, and I've been wondering this for quite a while, has the root cause investigation started? I really can't conceive of any reason why it wouldn't have been started immediately. It seems kind of like looking at a sort of a crime scene. Where evidence can be lost and people's memories can fade. Please answer that question first. Thank you very much.
All right, hi, Kathy. I'm going to address some of your questions first, and then I will ask Kim to chime in on a portion of your question. In terms of the independent root cause analysis report that the Oversight Committee is has tasked Scott Berger to complete, that investigation has not started yet. We have put Scott Berger and Associates in contact with MRC to work on getting the investigation started, and we are hoping to be able to report back later in June on that. In terms of the reports from TRC, there's a couple of different things that are going to be happening. First off, we will have an executive summary report of the information today and the slides today posted to our dedicated MRC page that Kayla has just dropped in the chat. Then in a few weeks, as Kim mentioned, we do expect to see the full report. I can't really speak to the length, but I can say traditionally in other oversight committees that we have had here in Contra Costa Health, those reports can be quite lengthy, 20+ pages. The report will contain the full details of the work that TRC has done, And as Kim had mentioned, a very important part of that process is that there is going to be a 45-day public comment period where the report will be accessible to the public. We're going to have a public meeting, and that is the chance for everyone in the public to send us comments on this report. Every single comment will need to be addressed or incorporated somehow into that final report before the Oversight Committee goes into the last step of reporting out to the various city councils and boards. In terms of how we're going to put that information out, Kim, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about it. I imagine it will be web page and plus.
Yes, it will definitely be web page, and Jenny is still on. So I think whatever details they mentioned, they want to be sure are included in the report are things that you will include. But yes, we will use all the tools that I just mentioned to make sure that that information gets out. We are working right now, like literally behind the scenes, to make sure that the content on the website now is updated with the absolute latest, the executive summary and the PowerPoint presentation, which I'm just going to answer my staff who are texting me now. Yes, guys, let's go ahead and get that posted just as soon as we can. So it's all there for you all to see. But yes, the next iteration is really the longer iteration. And I'll just say, I've worked on these projects before where there was one where we answered something like 7,500 public comments. So we take that seriously. It's an important part of the environmental justice process. And so we really feel like it's very important for folks to let us know what they think, let us know what concerns they have. So please do that, encourage your neighbors to do that. One of the things we really talked with the Oversight Committee about when we put you all together was how you could help us be conduits to the community. So, one of the things we want to do is really make sure that you all are fully informed so that you can take it out to the community as well. So those 45 days will be a very important time for you all to really get your comments in the record and get a response for those. So, so much more to come. This is not the end.
Great, thank you, Kim. I do see we have a couple more members of the public who have raised their hands, so we'll go to Jillian first and then to Alicia.
Jillian, you should be able to come off mute, and your 2 minutes are starting now.
Okay, thank you so much. I want to thank you so much for doing such a great job on explaining the process and the results. I think we got really lucky. I also think that this whole process has engaged a lot of people. I'm part of Healthy Martinez, and I consider this really lucky as part of what we're doing. We've been over this process that we've had some real victories in that we got this reviewed. We've gotten some changes in our alert system. And I think that we've been made more aware of the ongoing things. What are the daily emissions? Nearly a ton. What is it? A ton a day, something like that gets emitted into Martinez. And I think that what this has done has mobilized people to pay attention. And I'm not confident that a company that doesn't alert us the way they're supposed to can be trusted. But my faith in Contra Costa Health Department has grown considerably, and I'm deeply grateful. And I guess want to put everybody on notice that this isn't the end for us. We are going to be watching, and we want to be engaged, and we want to include more engagement from citizens because this is our town. And public safety is the most important thing. But thank you so much for this journey, and understand it's the beginning, not the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. Next, we'll go to Alicia and then Beth.
Alicia, you should be able to go ahead and come off mute.
Thank you. So I'm new to Martinez. I moved in literally during the initial shutdown. Like 3 days later, I shut my salon down and moved to Martinez. So I appreciate the meeting. I just wanted to bring a couple of points forward. I was one of the ones that actually filed a complaint regarding debris that was left on my car and in my yard. And I agree with Jillian, and I want to thank everyone at Healthy Martinez for all the work that you do. I think it's proving that it just takes even one person to make a difference. So I wanted to recognize all of you ladies. But my concern is that I had the opportunity to speak to 2 EPA agents, one from Alaska and one from North Carolina. And when I was giving him my information, We also I pointed out that there was a fire, and I believe December or January, that I didn't even know about until it was online. And so they were kind of alarmed to hear that. And I told them that I was very scared to relocate from the other side of the East Bay. I was born and raised in Alameda. And I knew I was moving into a town, obviously, that has a refinery. But that being said, the gentleman from North Carolina who, when he commented after I told him this is very, very scary and we're not sure what to do, can we eat our fruits and vegetables and whatnot? And he literally said, quote, "The fact that I'm standing here on your porch talking to you is not good." And we kind of left it at that. So I know there's an ongoing investigation with the FBI and the EPA. I was glad that I got the opportunity to talk to them. They were very friendly and
20
very
seconds.
helpful. Yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll go to Beth next.
All right, Beth, you should be able to come off mute.
Oh, hi. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for the presentations, and I will say that it's heartening to hear what everyone has had to say in the public comments too. But what I don't hear addressed is what happened in the first few days in terms of risks to our health. When I went outdoors in the morning, that was not ash. That was a gooey, sticky substance it was granular and had particulate matter in it. And we didn't find out for days what that was. I didn't take pictures of it. I didn't realize what it was. And the only thing that was offered were free car washes. Well, I don't care about my car. I care about my lungs and my health. And though it's, the report was very heartening, nothing has been addressed as to what happened in the first few days, what our lungs suffered, what our soil suffered, in the gardening. The long-term effects of that initial exposure is what I would like to have addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to do a last call for any comments from the public. Okay, I see Wendy has her hand raised.
All right, Wendy, you should be able to come off mute.
Hi, my name is Wendy. I too want to thank everybody for their presentations today. I think it's there is a bit of relief, a sigh of relief that I'm feeling today. And I say this as I was coughing a little bit. I am one of those people who unfortunately has developed lung issues since living in Martinez. I've been here about 13 years with my family. And prior to that, I was very active. I was an amateur athlete, and I was regularly cycling and using trails in the area. So I kind of wanted to come back to what some have already mentioned, which is there's a relief about the soil, but we haven't really discussed much about air health and the 300 tons of emissions that are coming from this particular refinery, according to BACMed. And I would like that to be evaluated and addressed, and also the potential for the installation of a wet gas scrubber and how that could benefit our communities and prevent what happened in November of 2022. Thank you again.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. I see we have Alex with her hand raised.
Alex, go ahead. You should be able to come off mute.
Okay, great. Yeah. Hey, everyone. Alex Nagy here, following from afar, and just wanted to disclose, if you didn't know, on the Governor's Office of Emergency Services, there was a hazardous material spill report in the last 2 days, dating yesterday, 2 different reports actually, about the Martinez Refining Company. One of them was a water line that was leaking oil and water into the parking lot. And another there was a waste pond that overfilled into a storm drain that went into the creek in the Carquinez Strait. And so this just really goes back to the points that community members have been making, is that, Martinez Refining Company and the parent owner, PBF Energy, is still subjecting this community to leaks and spills daily emissions, and really Contra Costa County needs to get to work to hold PBF Energy accountable and require the installation of the wet gas scrubber and more. It's unconscionable that PBF Energy is suing BACMed to get out of this implementation of this rule that will keep the communities safe. So wanted to disclose that. I'm sure folks did not know about that, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other hands raised for public comment. So with that, I think we can go ahead and end the meeting. Again, thank you so much to everyone on the Oversight Committee, and thank you to TRC for being here and presenting out the results for us today. And everyone, please, stay tuned. There's going to be more information posted on our web, and there are still a couple more steps left with this community risk assessment. So we will be communicating out to all of you. Thank you so much.